Let me know when we're ready. Okay, 9:59, I'm going to call our Governance Priorities Committee to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Ms. Klamosko, are there any additions or deletions?
No changes from administration.
Thank you very much. Someone want to move the agenda as presented? Councillor Wanchuk, thank you very much. All in favor? That's unanimous. On to our minutes of July 5th, Governance and Priority Meeting. Someone want to move those? Councillor Balazer, thank you very much. Comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to number 4A, which is a presentation related to the population and employment projections. Ms. Johnson, do you have an introduction or are we going right into it?
No, just a brief introduction. The Governance and Priorities Committee approved the population and employment project charter on April the 5th of 2022. After that, applications management was retained to complete those forecasts. They have now completed those forecasts and are here to present them to you today. The land use supply analysis, which is a component of this project, will be presented to you at a later date. The population and employment forecast will inform the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan 5-year interim review, the MDP interim review, and other county projects such as the Lagoon Capacity Assessment and Transit Feasibility Study. So without going further into it, I am pleased to introduce Gurpreet and Daryl of Applications Management to present those forecasts to you.
Okay, so the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you and good morning. As Laurie mentioned, we're here to present our results from the population and employment forecast analysis that we've been working on. This analysis that we've prepared provides population and employment forecasts for the period 2021 to 2050, and it includes 3 growth scenarios. There's a low, medium, and high. The intention of that is to be able to provide a range of scenarios within which we think that the future of the county would lie within that range between the low, medium, and high. So in our presentation today, we're going to kind of walk through some of the key assumptions that are included in the population employment results, as well as go through some of the results for the Leduc subregion, as well as the county. So in terms of the key growth sectors, as part of this analysis, we did examine what the key industries potentially could be for the provincial, regional, and Leduc County subregion. Based on work that we've done here, as well as other work that we have done, we do see similarities in terms of the key growth sectors that the provincial and regional economies are assuming are going to grow in kind of a medium to long-term forecast. So some of those growth sectors are also those that we think that would have potential growth opportunities within the Leduc County subregion. Many of these growth sectors, even at the provincial and regional levels, these are sectors that the province and the regions already have some type of competitive advantage of. Such as agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, logistics. So some of these sectors, we already have a strong economic base at the provincial and regional level. So the goal through this is really to talk about which of the sectors we think are going to be maintained, as well as which ones we think there's opportunities for economic diversification. So in terms of the Leduc County subregion, we have identified 5 different growth sectors. And again, these do largely align with those that are examined for the Edmonton region, through Global Edmonton, as well as other initiatives at the provincial level. The first one is looking at the energy sector. In terms of the energy sector, this is looking at, kind of maintaining conventional oil and gas, but also looking at opportunities for growth in alternative energy forms. Transportation and logistics is another one, which the Leduc County subregion obviously has a strong economic base in already. manufacturing, agriculture, food production and processing, which again, the region has a strong base in, as well as tourism. So in terms of the energy sector, as I mentioned, the provincial economy is shifting. The global economy is shifting towards more diversification, potentially away from kind of the traditional oil and gas towards more growth in alternative energy sources, such as solar, wind, hydrogen, natural gas, biosolids, even nuclear. And the local economy here in the Leduc subregion already has a strength in supporting the traditional oil and gas sector. So we really see this as an advantage in allowing them to really kind of maintain the conventional oil gas, but also be able to pivot in terms of providing support in some of these other alternative energy forms. In terms of transportation and logistics.
Could I ask a question there?
Yeah.
If I may, one of the things I don't see there, yeah, I do now, forget, I just misread it.
Okay, yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, yeah, no worries. In terms of transportation and logistics, obviously the Leduc subregion, having the Edmonton International Airport here, having multimodal transportation with access to air, rail, and road, makes it in a strong position to be able to continue to expand their existing transportation and logistics base. As we've seen over the last several years, there's been a lot of development with transportation and warehousing specifically in North Nisku. So we think that provides a competitive advantage and the opportunity to continue to develop that. In terms of manufacturing, I think there's a couple of different, I guess, subcategories under manufacturing that the Leduc County subregion could really continue to expand as well as diversify. As I mentioned before, being a large support to traditional oil and gas in terms of manufacturing and specialized machine shops. So there is an opportunity to pivot from that in terms of now supporting some of the other alternative energy projects that are happening within the Edmonton region as well as across the province. The other piece is looking at, as I mentioned before, obviously the county has a strong agricultural base, but looking at the opportunities for more food manufacturing locally. As individuals and businesses are looking at sourcing products locally, there's definitely an opportunity there to utilize the strengths of the strong agricultural base here in the region to diversify in terms of what food manufacturing can occur locally. So in agriculture, food production and processing really looks at that, opportunities for specialized food production, as well as other types of agricultural businesses to support the agricultural production that's already happening in the region. And then tourism. So tourism is, a key growth sector at the provincial and the regional level. In terms of the Leduc County subregion, some of this has already been happening, over the last decade. There's been developments at the Edmonton International Airport in terms of the outlet mall, the casino, the raceway. So there are opportunities to continue, expanding the food and accommodation as well as other entertainment around the airport. So taking into consideration those key growth sectors, we did develop an employment forecast for the period 2021 to 2050 for the Leduc subregion. In terms of the overall forecast, presented in this table, we have our base, which is 2021. And the three scenarios, as I outlined before. Here we've assumed in the low scenario that there would be an average annual growth rate of employment for the Leduc subregion of 1.5%. In the medium scenario, the average annual growth rate is 2.4%. And the medium scenario does assume that employment in the Leduc subregion would double by 2050. And in the high scenario, the average annual growth rate is 2.8%. In terms of the distribution of growth across the region, A lot of these are either existing or future planned employment areas, both within the Leduc County as well as other municipalities that are in the Leduc subregion. We do continue to assume that the QE2 corridor will be kind of a focus just because of the large transportation corridor, that there'll be a focus for a lot of the future non-residential employment growth in the subregion. So some of these employment areas that are situated along that corridor do continue to be the ones that attract employment growth over the forecast period.
I have a couple of questions.
Yep.
So Telford Lake and South Nisku, I think we're thinking, and I'm kind of looking at Jordan now, maybe, that once we finish the Spine Road, that might be areas of growth. So how have your numbers included work that we're already doing to either open land or concentrate on things? And just an explanation, Highway 19 versus south of Devon. South of Devon's actually an ASP area. What is Highway 19? What does that mean?
So Highway 19, so some of these employment areas were kind of based off of lands that were previously planned when they were part of Leduc County.
Okay.
So that includes
Okay,
Crossroads and
so that'd
Highway
be- Yep,
19.
that'd be Devon.
So
Okay.
it would be assuming that some of that development would continue to go on just
Okay.
because of the proximity to the QE2 and Highway 19. In terms of the other, you asked the question about South Nisku in terms of opening up of the Spine Road. I think from our perspective, some of those, enhancements to infrastructure would probably, maybe there's an opportunity to shift some of the employment growth that we've put in other parts of
Okay.
Nisku there. I think that we've, as you'll see when I talk about the Leduc County forecast, a lot of our employment growth for the county does assume growth within Nisku. A large chunk of it is within North Nisku, just because there's a lot of greenfield potential still there. But we do also assume redevelopment opportunities in Central Nisku. So I think if there was that, that opportunity for greater access to transportation in South Nisku, some of that
Would transfer.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, just a little bit to add to that, and you won't see that today, but it's coming, is looking at the land supply analysis.
Great.
And so one of the things that we take into account is where is land available, greenfield, brownfield, or other kinds of redevelopment opportunities to satisfy what we see as the demand within the subregion. So just to preempt that a bit, there's probably no shortage of industrial or / industrial business park land available in the county. So when the infrastructure is in place to go there, and when existing lands become in short supply, then you'll see more growth in those other areas.
I think, and that shows in Central Nisku with our development plan there in the next chart.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So just to talk about Leduc County specifically. So in terms of the county, again, we presented 3 different growth scenarios. In the low scenario, employment is projected to grow to about 23,000 jobs, which is 1.5. Oh, no, it is. One of my pages is missing, but so in the low scenario, employment is projected to grow to about 22,000. In the medium scenario, it's going up to about 28,000. And in the high scenario, we've projected employment to go to about 30,000. In terms of the distribution of employment, again, we did look at, what are the existing major employment areas within the county, as well as some future potential opportunities. So just to talk about some of those, in terms of East Vista, as you'll see when I talk about population, we are assuming that most of the population growth within the county is going to be located in East Vistas. And as a result, we have included some commercial and non-commercial employment growth in East Vistas to be consistent with that, to support that local population growth. In terms of agricultural hubs, so this would be, potentially looking at an agricultural hub in the county. There obviously, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of existing agricultural activity and support for agricultural businesses. And this would really just provide the opportunity to have synergies for that if they were all kind of located in one area. and also to support kind of that diversification within the food manufacturing. In terms
Oh,
of the,
we have a question. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sorry, just to clarify the numbers, your number 40 under agricultural hub, is that 40 people are employed or there's 40 businesses that employ?
so that's 40 jobs, and
Okay.
that agricultural hub, so that's a great question. That agricultural hub, this is assuming the agricultural hub is located at the intersection of Highway 60 and Highway 39.
Okay.
So there are a couple of businesses there already, so that base employment includes that. There obviously are a lot of other agricultural businesses, and those are kind of included in the rest of Leduc County there. Yeah, so good question. In terms of EIA, which is the Edmonton International Airport, we have this projection of employment for the airport does assume an increase of air traffic related to passenger volumes, but it also includes employment related to other aviation and non-aviation development that would happen on airport lands. So as you know, over the last several years, there has been a lot of development happening on the QE airport related to warehouse logistics and transportation and that. So this does include the opportunities for those to continue on those lands. In terms of Genesee, we do assume over the forecast period that there will be a phase out to natural gas. And that reduction in employment is based off of the assumption that the operating jobs related to that would be reduced.
So those would be the mining jobs that we're seeing as a reduction. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then New Sarepta, this is again in alignment with the MDP. New Sarepta is assumed to be a growth hamlet. And so again, we have assumed a moderate amount of population growth to occur in New Sarepta over the forecast period. And the growth here would be related commercial and non-commercial services to support that local population. As I mentioned before, so Nisku itself is probably the primary locus of employment growth activity in the future. We have broken Nisku out into North, Central, and South. North Nisku, right now, we've assumed that it would have the largest employment growth over the course of the forecast period. And that's largely based off opportunities because there is still a lot of greenfield land available for redevelopment. And over the last several years, they have been kind of the primary locus for a lot of new development that's happened in the county. In terms of Central Nisku, this would also assume, as you mentioned, there's the Nisku Major Employment Center, ASP. And so this would include opportunities for redevelopment. And as we present the land use supply analysis, we'll share that with you in terms of looking at potential redevelopment opportunities within Central Nisku. South Nisku, again, this is really, this is the Saunders Lake ASP. This is largely tied to that. So there are opportunities for greenfield development there. And as you mentioned, with further access to transportation and servicing, that could open that area up for more development. And then south of Devon, so again, this is related to their south of Devon industrial ASP. There isn't any large type of development there today, but this does assume that there could be a locus of some type of activity there in the future. And then throughout the rest of the county, there is a slight increase in employment, and that's just for any other types of agriculture or other types of businesses across the county. Obviously, that number, most of the employment growth in the county is kind of situated within Nisku as well as the Edmonton International Airport. So this next chart really looks at the share of employment. So what each of those bars, the first one is for 2021, and it shows the existing employment base by two-digit NAICS industry. And then the three scenarios are for 2050. So the intention here is really to show that there are some industries that we've identified as growth sectors that are going to shift the employment base over the forecast period. And specifically, transportation and warehousing, manufacturing, as well as employment in utilities related to alternative energy. Those would be sectors that, over the three scenarios over the long term, they might comprise a larger share of the total employment base in the county. Okay, So just to move on to the population forecast. So similarly with employment, we did develop population forecasts for the Leduc subregion for the period 2021 to 2050. And as well, we did generate 3 scenarios, so a low, medium, and high growth scenario. In terms of the Leduc subregion, employment is projected in these 3 scenarios. In the low scenario, it's projected to have an average annual growth rate of 0.9%. In the medium scenario, the Leduc subregion is projected to have a growth rate of about 1.4%. And this does assume about 40,000 additional people in that medium scenario in the Leduc subregion. And in the high scenario, the average annual growth rate is projected to be 2.1%. And again, this analysis, the intention of doing the analysis for the Leduc subregion is obviously we know growth within Leduc County doesn't happen in isolation. It's obviously impacted by growth that's going to happen within the Edmonton region as well. And so this kind of presents, just for information purposes, just so you can get some context in terms of how we look at growth within other municipalities in the Leduc subregion. So in terms of the county, again, for the 3 scenarios, in the low scenario, the county is assumed to grow at a rate of 0.7%. In the medium scenario, it's assumed to grow at 1.3%. So assuming about almost 7,000 additional people over that almost 30-year time period. And in the high scenario, it's projected to grow by an average annual growth rate of 1.6%. In terms of the distribution of growth, as I mentioned earlier, in alignment with the MDP, the largest growth area within the county is assumed to be East Vistas. So over the course of the forecast, you can see it grows to, over 6,000 people in the high scenario. In terms of other areas, New Sarepta and the MDP was also identified as a growth hamlet. So we have assumed, a moderate level of growth in that community. Some of the other hamlets, we've assumed that they would largely stay relatively stable, just because they do have a housing stock there. And for affordability reasons, we are assuming that they would continue to, kind of maintain their populations over the long term. And then we have assumed a little bit of growth in the lakeshore communities as well over the course of the forecast period. And so in terms of the next steps, we are, as Daryl and Lori had mentioned, we are finalizing the land supply analysis. So that analysis really looks at taking our population and employment forecasts and looking at what the land requirements are within the county, within those employment areas, and what would the remaining supply of land be both on the residential and the non-residential side. So that'll be something that we'll present. We'll prepare a draft report on that and present that in the future. So I'll just pause there for questions.
Any further questions? Councillor Balazer?
Yeah, I'm just looking, you're talking about a land supply. So as you're going through your land supply analysis, do you see your numbers changing? Maybe because the land supply may not be there as much as you might think, or this is pretty well based on what you know?
Yeah, great question. So as we have been working on this forecast, we have been working on the land supply at the same time. So the distribution of growth largely, I think, would be consistent with what we've presented today. And we've assumed that the lands would be available based off of, the area available and the densities within those particular areas. So I don't see the distribution within our existing forecast changing that much as a result of that, because we have already taken most of that into consideration as part of this analysis.
And maybe just to add to that, I mean, one of the reasons why that would be the case is we were concerned, about how the potential growth that we're projecting might fit within the available land supply. And if there were any constraints that we saw, then we might have to adjust the growth forecast to make sure that we're not building more than we can actually accommodate. So we have been doing these things in parallel. So further to Gurpreet's answer, it probably won't change very much because we know that there's probably a sufficient amount of supply in all of these areas to accommodate the growth that we're projecting.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis has a question.
Thank you. As far as your key growth sectors, would the intention of identifying these also help us identify and make it, if we had to make any changes within the municipal development plan to change policies so that it's easy for businesses to come in? Are they kind of in alignment with each other?
Yeah, just from the consultant's perspective, and the Lori and Jordan may comment from their planning perspective too, but we're trying to allocate the growth by industry into areas which currently that growth could be accommodated by the plan. So based on the planning restrictions, requirements, the growth that we're projecting, where we're putting it, we think could be accommodated there. However, because it's a forecast, just one caveat is that some of these types of things that we're looking at far into the future may be quite different than exist now. So there may need to be some future reconsideration of the allowable land uses within those planning areas to accommodate that type of growth when it comes.
Councillor Smith?
Just a comment or an observation. Don't understate the Spine Road, because we are looking at trying to 4-lane that. And allegedly that will be one of the 3 roads coming out of Edmonton 170th if they ever get to it. So we anticipate probably more growth up there because of the road. And what happens when Highway 2 has an accident or it gets over capacity. We're going to drive that through. And the potential to probably have development with Edmonton in that intermodal area. Their Ellerslie area there is booming. And of course, Edmonton never puts infrastructure in. They put it in after the fact. So that area in Edmonton is, in spite of their tax base, developing plus across the road. So we're going to see that Spine Road become extremely important to handle. It was like when we were full oil and gas 10 years ago, that road was impossible to get down at any point. So the Spine Road, definitely consider it a little bit more, because we have put a lot of, I think, importance on the Spine Road and the development and where that's going to lead for jobs. So make sure, again, just to incorporate, and that's fairly new. Drive by and have a look. It's amazing to see that road, probably 60-70% of the pavement done already. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Just a comment. One of the pieces that council is exploring right now is related to the relationship between country residential growth and hamlet growth. That we're having conversations about trying to encourage more growth around those hamlets, because there's infrastructure there already as opposed to just country residential. And if that I'm sure that you've heard that from our staff, but it would mean, when I look at these numbers, perhaps less, the numbers wouldn't change, but we would have less perhaps country residential and more around our hamlets as a way to try and put people where the services are. Yeah. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Scobie.
I guess I just comment on the Genesee end of it. I think we're looking at trying to get some development out there in industrial. And so, to take a look at it, just the mine's going to close up and we lose all that employment, and that's where it's going to stay, I think is a little short-sighted. I think we're really getting around to it now, where we're looking at getting some industrial and some business going on out there on reclaimed land and stuff that, I think should be thought about in this. And it looks to me like we're just writing it off as, we're going to lose a bunch of employment out there with the coal mine closing, when I don't know that that's really the way it is.
Just, if I could, just a quick comment. Thank you for that. We haven't, you're right, we haven't considered any potential industrial or related kind of development around the Genesee power plant, but we will give that a look.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Capital Power was in this year and did a really great presentation on how they're repurposing. You can probably find their report. So they're looking at capturing carbon capture. They're also looking at repurposing the ash, which was buried, for concrete. I talked to Mark Smith at the State of the Union, he indicates there's investors looking at going in and using all the byproducts of the waste and just changing what they're going. So I agree with Ray. I see Capital Power leveraging their asset out there and not letting it die. Of course, the power plant's going to go, but that coal plant is never going to shut down. And the people I talked to was trying to strip the carbon out of what they're doing, making the coal a little bit more useful for industrial. So again, that I can't see that being just mothballed at any time soon. So employment, I think, will continue out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Certainly aligns with what we're concentrating on and working on. And I think that's really important. Look forward to the final reports. Looking for someone to move his information. Councillor Lewis, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to 5A, which is 2022 Q2 reporting. Ms. Klamosko, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. We are here this morning with all of our senior management team to present Council with our Q2 2022 reporting. We do have a report for consideration, so for Council's acceptance of the report and attachments as information. So corporate reporting provides Council and the public with progress update on our various programs and projects at June 30th, 2022. So similar to the presentation we've done previously with quarterly reporting, we do have an agenda laid out with all the reports, and I will go through that in that order.
And we'll ask questions as per report and move through that way. Thank you, Ms.
Absolutely.
Klamosko.
So going to the table of contents, so we will go through it in this order. So going to page 43, which is the county highlights, we've provided some information in terms of various activities that have occurred in Q2. So we've provided a highlights section, just highlighting some various work throughout the municipality in Q2. Are there any questions on any of the highlights that were mentioned on that page?
Councillor Lewis.
No questions on the highlights. I think it's amazing the work that gets done in a short few months. Is there a spot on our website that this gets put on so residents can see this information? Because this is huge. I've heard a couple of residents say over the past little bit, I get nothing from my taxes. It irks me, but this is information that is valuable to them to see.
Yes, this information is on the website. We do have it posted within the agenda packages for this meeting, as well as we have it under our documents listing under quarterly reporting. So that does get filed there for people to be able to look at.
I have a question and it'll probably be covered later, but on the collected taxes, that doesn't equal 100%. I think it's about 92. So is this more or less than we have been in previous years? Is this about where we sit? Ms. Weiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's very comparable to last year, actually a little bit more than last year. And since then, we've continued to collect.
Okay.
We'll also see a little bit of an influx around the end of October, just before that November penalty.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Scobie?
Just the council approved the 2022 audited financial statements. Is that not the 2021 financial statements?
Yes, that would.
22?
Yes, that should have been 2021.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Councillor.
All right.
Move on.
So going into the next sections of the county highlights document, we have on some bar graphs on the revenue and expenditures. On that next page, we provide a summary on real estate market activity for vacant lot sales as well as improved lot sales. The next page in the report speaks to some development highlights and the status of the work being done on some various developments occurring within Q2.
Any questions on any of those?
Okay. And then moving to the next page, we provide some statistics on permits. So we have development permits, building permits, and safety codes permits. And then provide a short update on health and safety highlights for the quarter. And then on the final page of the report, we have a status update on our whistleblower complaints, which we've had no complaints received in Q2, and then also our debt services limit. So that just indicates that we have just over 43 million of debt limit available, and we currently have 40 million outstanding in debentures. Any questions on any of the
Any of
county
those?
highlights?
I have a question just on this page, and I think I asked it last time, and I'll ask it again. When is our next debenture ending? Like, if that makes sense. So we have lots of debentures, they end at different times. When do we get out of one? For lack of better terms. Ms. Weiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
When have we paid it off? Thank you for the good words, Councillor Blaser.
I can definitely communicate it officially by email. I don't know off the top
Okay.
of my head. It's within the next 5 years, though. I
Okay.
can say that with
So
confidence.
this will stay pretty much the same for the next 5 years unless we add more to the debentures.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so then going into our departmental quarterly reports, we start with administration. So on page 59, we have assessment services.
Questions on anything in assessment services? Seeing none?
Okay. The next section that we have within administration is corporate services on page 64 of the package.
Questions on corporate services?
Okay. And then the final report within administration is the finance report on page 73. All right, just to backtrack slightly. Excuse me, I did miss the corporate plan on page 49. So this is the work being done out of the county manager's office. Are there any questions on the corporate plan?
Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. Just questioning where we are with transit, because I know your strategy or your goal 8 was redefine a transit strategy. Where are we with that?
Come on, you have to come up to a microphone, sorry, because we are live streaming. We want to make sure people can hear your response. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor.
That's all right.
Currently, we have a consultant on board who's busy doing interviews with some of the local municipalities to determine what their needs are. They're moving into other stakeholders here shortly, determining again what their needs are, and we should be moving into a series of open houses here before the end of the month. So that's well underway right now. The intent is that we'll have budgetary information for potential consideration by council within the next month and a bit, so we can get it integrated into budget for council consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Des, while I have you there, and again, some of the conversations I've had with the regional transit is Edmonton may be somewhat iffy continuing with that and with the new council. Of course, our plan with Leduc Transit is to dissolve once Leduc moves into that new arrangement, but that may be at risk. Have you heard anything that may complicate Leduc County's transit delivery of service? Of course, we're still in with Leduc Transit, which has buses and which is delivering service. Just to comment on your, I guess your confidence that the regional transit will stand up and we will have to find services beyond that.
Where the regional transit is and the confidence that not being heavily involved in their interactions with other entities, I'm not too sure. I know that there is a report going to the City of Edmonton Council tomorrow outlining the advantages, disadvantages, and potential asks from the City of Edmonton for regional transit. I would say it is a qualified acceptance by the City of Edmonton, not necessarily an outright endorsement, but something that they're working with, because they do want to be fairly cautious moving forward with this because at the same time, they want to make sure that they're looking after their own citizens as well. So.
Okay, further questions?
All right, so the next report in the package is on page 79 for agricultural services.
I have a question that's not on the report, but I see we have ag here, so I will ask it. It was a question I got from a producer. And I think it might be either Garrett and it might be a little bit of enforcement too. And the question was, do farmers need to have their grain loads tarped? And the question was in relation to weeds and noxious weeds being spread around the county. I did not have an answer for the gentleman because nobody's asked that question before. So Garrett and or Clarence.
Good morning. Yes, all cargo of commercial nature and even non-commercial needs to be tarped in Leduc County as per the traffic bylaw that was passed a couple of years ago.
Okay, that's my answer then. Good job, Garrett. Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of going to tour the Hofstra farm this past week with the chamber, and they have asked me to extend the invite to Council and Ag Services to come out and tour. They are so proud of the work that they've done, and they would like to share it with Council and Ag Services. So I know you have their contact information if you wanted to look at setting that up.
Right. All right, and given that we have all of our senior management team here, we definitely welcome any questions, whether it's on the report or not. So thank you for that. So the next report in the package is for enforcement services, which is on page 89 of the package.
So to enforcement services, do we enforce untarped grain loads? Have we? I think it would be a stickling time to do that, but just wondering if we ever have.
Yes, Mayor, we do have a robust cargo securement program that we've introduced a couple of years ago, both proactive education, and we haven't issued any tickets to those sectors of our community yet. I should qualify that saying that it has to get to a certain level up to the box. So it can't, if it's a half load, for example, it's not required unless it's a loose load. So there's a couple of little quirky things within the bylaw, but I'm happy to hear that although we do get the occasional complaint, we haven't had to resort to any charges yet.
And I think a reminder to people as well, I think it's a time of the year where everybody's busy and maybe not pulling the tarp on because I'm only going a little ways. I mean, there's lots of decisions that get made that other people see and you maybe don't notice. Councillor Scobie?
I guess that was just kind of the comment I was going to make. You guys are hauling off combine back to the yard. They might be going a couple miles.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be, when they're hustling along there, they're not going to roll the tarp on and go 2 miles and roll the tarp off and whatever. So I hope we're not going to go and sit and watch for this. But you know, I totally understand if you start shipping to town and they're going to be heading down the highway, well, it should be done. But you know, just traveling around from field to yard and stuff. I hope we're not going to get into that one.
But I will let my resident know that yes, it needs to be secured and yes, we do watch for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for enforcement?
So the next report in the package is for engineering and it's on page 98. Okay. There's no questions for engineering. We'll move on to family and community support services, which is on page 107. All right. The next report in the package is for fire services, which is on page 114.
Just a question related to the implementation and the new burning bylaw. Have there been any issues with it? I don't think we changed things significantly, but was just wondering if there were any issues.
We've heard no concerns with the implementation of that bylaw. It
Thank
didn't
you.
have great impact to what we were
No.
doing previously.
No, it's pretty straightforward. Counselor Blaser?
Yeah, I know we have some people on this committee. I was just wondering, are we still in discussions with Warburg as far as the fire services, or do we have meetings planned, or how is it coming?
Through the mayor, I spoke with the CAO for Warburg this morning, and they only talked to their lawyer on Friday since our last meeting. So it's a bit of a delay on their end still. I expect that the two lawyers will be talking soon now, and then we'll move forward as that allows.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor Lewis?
Thank you. Are we still under a fire restriction even with the current rain we just had?
Yes, with the wind, unfortunately, that's dried it out pretty quickly.
Thank you.
So the next report in the package is for legislative, which is 124. The next department report is Parks and Recreation on page 125.
Just a comment on your department highlights. Certainly, I attended the Indigenous Day celebration at Rundle's Mission. It was great to see the number of schools. I think there were 2 schools or 2 groups of children that had come out for that day. And it was nice to see them out there participating as well. So I don't know if we were part of that organization that invited them out, but it was a great idea. Thank you. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. Just questioning the number that you had 360 attendees at the Thorsby party in the park.
It was a whole town.
Yes,
Wow.
but we also strategically combine with other activities and year-end type to allow that to be that successful, but it's a great partnership, and hosting it right in the community is also strategic as well, because it's several of our residents, but
You
it
bet.
allows those numbers to be that successful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good job.
Any other questions for Parks and Recreation?
So the next report in the package is for planning and
We have one
development.
more, I
Oh,
think.
sorry, I apologize.
Just looking at your financial reporting, and I see that your library support is at 96%, and just questioning why that one was so high this quarter.
The library contributions are a one-time payment to the library board, which essentially is the 100% of that budget. And then the rest would be our cost shares, which would then we have as part of the cost share process. So the library contribution is a one-time payment at the start of the year.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for
Counselor
that. That's
Smith?
probably my misunderstanding that the library wasn't done. I would like to offer the mayor right now a 2-hour workshop I could run on the library. That would how we pay them, and different times they've come out. So I will extend that offer to the mayor for a workshop for 2 hours just on library functions if she's agreeable. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for planning, or sorry, Parks and Recreation?
All right, the
Stephen?
next report in the package is for planning and development on page 133. Moving on to the next report, we have public transit on page 143. The next department report is road operations on page 145.
Just, if I may, just a comment, especially on the asphalt surface roads, our repair and maintenance program seems to be superior to the provinces. Certainly, the repairs done on the asphalt surfaces that I drive on have been done well, and it's working. And I still receive complaints about Highway 39, how MCOM is actually repairing them, because it seems to be hit and miss. And I know that's not ours, but I just wanted to do that shout out. It is expensive, but we know that if we don't fix them while we have a small crack or hole, it just creates a bigger issue. So thank you for that. Counselor Lewis.
Thank you. On one of your variances on your financial reporting, it talks about the cost share agreement for Airport Road. I've just never caught wind of that before. Can you explain what the cost share is for that road, please?
Yeah, so Airport Road here, we invoice the city of Leduc our cost sharing amount generally later in the year because we do the maintenance exclusively on Airport Road.
Okay, so the next section of reports is for utilities. So within that section, we have water distribution, wastewater collection, and waste management.
Just an update if I could. We did take over managing at the airport. How is that going? And have there been any significant issues or it's a pretty smooth transition?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The contract that we've taken over, that we've had with the city, or sorry, Edmonton International Airport's going very well. Great working relationship. We're making actually great strides in assisting in improving their wastewater wastewater transmission system, as well as some of the reservoirs. We've executed a number of projects for them to improve the quality of their services. They also had a very significant water leak right beside the NAV Canada building that we assisted them with, basically managed the entire project for them. Entirely unexpected, extremely complicated, a number of very poor subsoil conditions, unexpected things like 6 feet of styrofoam underneath the parking lot. And we could not shut down service to the NAV Canada building at all during the entire repair. No as-built for that area, so everything was kind of unknown. So anything that could possibly go wrong lined up to go wrong. But at the end of the day, we were able to come to a successful conclusion. Water was restored, service wasn't interrupted, and we're working on a plan to basically replace that line with the airport. So been working out very well with them, and I've had an opportunity to sit down with them a number of times asking how we're doing, what could we do better. And it's always been glowing reviews about our staff and the work that we're doing out there.
Good news. Thank you.
The next report in the package is on page 163, which is fiscal services. And then on page 165, we have requisitions expenditures. All right, so going to page 166 in the package, we have major and capital project plan updates. So the first summary here on page 166 is just an overall summary of all the major and capital projects, what's been completed, what's work in progress. Going into the next page, it has detail for the major project plan. Again, same breakdown of categories, but just for major projects. So these are operating type projects. So then going to the next page in the package, it's a breakdown of all the projects that we have within our 2022 major project plan, and basically provides a short status update for every project, and then does provide a project indicator status if there's an impact to schedule or to budget. So that would be the items in yellow. Are there any questions on any of the projects within the major project plan?
I have a question. Kavanaugh landfill reclamation. Once this piece is done, are we done totally? Will we get a reclamation certificate?
We do have a budget item in the 2023 budget, which is year 5 of 5. So this is year 4 of 5. So next year, if everything goes well, we'll have the final reclamation certificate and that project will be complete.
Yay. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next page.
I do have a question. Yep. Sorry. The AVL system. Again, I believed 2 terms ago, we put money in for the hardware, not the software. And is this tying in with that? Sorry for that. Or is it a different system? Thanks, Kent.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The intent of this project was to determine what we did have at the county from an inventory perspective, what devices, may not have had AVL installed. And so the gap analysis is the stage that we just completed. And we're looking at this, the next stage is the putting together a recommendation for going forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so then moving on to the next summary page, which is for the capital project plan. So it breaks down again what's been completed as of Q2 and work in progress and the funding breakdown. So going to page 171 starts a more detailed breakdown of all the projects. Again, has the status indicator, if the project is complete or there's an impact to schedule or cost. Or also if it's complete and if it's over or under budget. So are there any questions on any of the capital project plan?
Any questions? I have a question on the non-potable water point purchase. Do we have any idea what the usage is there? Thanks, Mr. Broadbent.
Yes, I think there's 60, don't quote me exactly, but I think there's 66 users signed up.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a success.
Good
for
decision,
sure.
and thanks to Capital Power for their
Contribution.
help with
for sure.
putting that in. Thank you. And I guess this one might be for Mr. Mriglaw. Do we have an idea when Spine Road might be? I mean, we're having the world's best construction season right now, so.
Absolutely. It's been absolutely phenomenal weather. Right now, they're still aiming for about the middle of October to have that road complete. We're going to have a sit down with the consultant and the construction crew here fairly quickly because we want to try to nail down some timeframes or potential ribbon cutting, something of that nature, because this is the largest project that Leduc County has ever undertaken. The federal government's been a fantastic partner, so we do want to make sure that we celebrate this success.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's good news.
Okay. All right. So moving on from the project plan documents, going to page 175 of the package, we have an operating reserve schedule. So at the end of Q2 at June 30th, 2022, in our operating fund reserve, we have just over $25.5 million in operating reserves. And then on the next page, we have our capital fund reserve schedule, which we have just over $22 million in capital reserves.
Questions on the reserve schedule? Seeing none.
Okay. So that is, that concludes our presentation for quarterly report. So we do have a recommendation for council to consider to accept the report and attachments as information.
So thank you again to staff for working on these and putting them together. They're easy to read, they're a quick snapshot, and it certainly keeps council aware of what's happening in each area so that should something come to council because it's off, either off budget or it's not proceeding the way it should in timelines, we already have had that information, so greatly appreciate it. So thank you to you and to your staff for all that work. Looking for someone to move for information. Councillor Smith, thank you. Comments or questions? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to 5B, Federal Electoral Districts Redistribution.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we have a report for Council that I will review. Some changes that are being proposed to our federal electoral districts boundaries. So the Alberta Commission will use the 2021 census population counts made available by Statistics Canada to revise the boundaries of the province's 37 federal electoral districts. The Commission has drafted its redistribution proposal to reflect the growth and shifts in the population, balanced by consideration for communities of interest since the last decennial census in 2011. So Alberta's population count has increased from just over 3.6 million to over 4.2 million between 2011 and 2021 censuses. The application of the formula and rules contained in the Constitution resulted in an increase of the number of seats in the House of Commons in Alberta from 338 seats to 342, with a total number assigned to Alberta from 34 to 37. So there is electoral quota for each of Alberta electoral districts of just over 115,000. And the proposal is undergoing a broad public consultation process, which the Commission plans to travel across Alberta to hear from those who wish to express their views. So there, in the report, we speak to the principles that are governing the Commission's work in redrawing these electoral boundaries. And so that's summarized in the report. So in summary, the overarching principle of the Act is to ensure that each electoral district shall, as closely as reasonably possible, correspond to the electoral quota for the province. And often this is referred to as population parity. When drawing the boundaries, the Commission must consider communities of interest or identity, historical patterns, and geographic size. Where the Commission determines that it is necessary or desirable to deviate from population parity, it has the discretion to do so within the limits set out in the Act. So currently, as I mentioned, there is public participation that is occurring as we speak. The Alberta Commission is holding in-person hearings and may hold virtual hearings to gather opinions on the proposed boundaries and electoral district names. Leduc County has submitted its intention to make a presentation at Wetaskiwin on September 15, 2022, commencing at 7 p.m. So administration has registered the mayor, and as well, Councillor Smith had indicated a desire to speak as well. So we did register for the mayor and Councillor Smith to speak at the event on September 15th. And so the intent of today's discussion is to gather council's feedback, to inform the mayor's speaking notes for the event, and to discuss Leduc County's position on the matter so that we can prepare those speaking notes. So just going to the attachments to the report, I just want to highlight a couple of items here. Oh, so going to the letter that was written to the redistribution federal electoral districts, just want to highlight in that second paragraph, we say Leduc County in its entirety is currently within the Edmonton-Wetaskiwin district and is represented by one member of parliament. This representation provides consistency and uniformity throughout the county and best serves the diverse needs of our residents. So the proposed redistribution separates Leduc County into 5 districts, which fragments our federal representation, both geographically and economically, as shown in the attached map in below table. So here on this letter, it shows the population that would be divided amongst these 5 new districts, as well as the area, the hectares. Going into the map, you'll see on the next page that this is showing the 5 various districts of how Leduc County would be divided. And the next page just shows the current state and how Leduc County is all covered within the one area. There is also a letter attached that the Chamber, Leduc, Nisku, Wetaskiwin region had sent as well, expressing their thoughts on the changes. So with that, I would turn it over to council for a discussion on the matter and how you would like us to prepare the information for that presentation on September 15th.
Thank you, Ms. Klamosko. And before I take Councillor Smith, just a few comments. If you take a look at the letter that was sent out from the county manager's office, you'll see that it's dated July 28th. The deadline for deciding whether or not council had a position on this, because we actually we do not yet have a council position on how we want to proceed, was during our council break. So with a phone call discussion with the county manager, we thought it prudent to not try to guess what council's position would be, but to instead to book a time to speak. And if council chose not to have a position on this, then that would just, we would let them know that we wouldn't be speaking for or against the changes. So first I wanted to say that council does not have a position on whether we think this is a good idea or not a good idea. And that's part of our discussion today. Once we decide either way, and if we choose to have a position on this, and again, it is a council decision, if we choose to have a decision on this, then part of the discussion would be, and why do we think it's a bad decision for the county of Leduc? So before we decide how we're going to speak, I guess we need to decide whether or not we want to take a position. We've chosen, for instance, not to take a position on provincial policing. We can choose to not take a position on this as well. But I just wanted to clarify that neither myself nor the county manager presumed or assumed that the council would want to be speaking for or against this at this meeting. So the floor is open. Again, we don't have a position yet. So I guess the first debate would be, do we believe we need to be speaking about this as a council? And what would our rationale be? So that's what we're open for on the floor. Councillor Scobie.
I'm looking at this, we're saying that Leduc County in its entirety is in Wetaskiwin. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think County West were in Yellowhead. So we have two MPs. So they're just
That's
quite correct in that statement.
Thank you for that clarification, and I believe you are right. We do have Gerald Soroka. I was going to say Sikora because I know that name better. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Actually, we have three, and the reason I will be speaking, and I will preface my comments when I show up, that I'm Rick Smith, the resident that lives in Battle River Crowfoot. So that's the third riding we have. I think his name is Damian Carrick. I've talked to him a few times if he could ever make his way back up, and he said not in his lifetime. Again, prefacing, I do have that right within the MJ to speak, but preface at the beginning that it's my opinion, but I am there also representing my constituents. The problem that I have and that I need to address, and you can go to your map with the green outlines, the new proposed one. Battle River Crowfoot has not changed. I have no representation federally. It has nothing to do with any of the growth boards, any of the initiatives. We have sewer, which is capital region, sewer, water, capital region, transportation demands, grant demands, things that we're trying to do. And I have nothing in common with Consort, Wainwright, Statler. We are in the capital region. So we've had really poor representation out in that area. And you can see it's an afterthought. Even if they ran the line straight down from Toefield, at least we could be contained in Sherwood Park, Beaumont, which we were. We used to have an MP and he came down a lot to New Sarepta. Then that changed. And then when Mike Lake took over Wetaskiwin area, we somehow ended up in Crowfoot. So for me, and I'm just speaking on the lack of representation now and into the future. One area that I hope the county takes a position on, if they don't, I'll take my own opinion on it, is I know Dane Lloyd, who represents Spruce Grove right now. He's a good MP, but he also represents Atchison and the interests of Parkland County. I've talked to him a lot, talked to him on the coal front. Mike Lake allegedly supports Nisku Airport, which is, again, in my opinion, economic drivers. And to have Dane in, I would be concerned that Dane may not know the importance of Nisku and the airport in the name of the importance of Atchison. I look at Sherwood Park, Beaumont, and they've now come down into the Beaumont area, and they also have special interests, which is going to be their refineries, their areas around Fort Saskatchewan. And so that, and you have the Heartland in Sturgeon. So everybody, I believe there's 4 major employment living areas around Edmonton, and to group us in, we will lose representation under Spruce Grove and Leduc because our MP lives in that area. For Sherwood Park, Beaumont, again, which will include some of my residents, that area, they will represent their refineries, their industrial areas. And again, my area is just not represented whatsoever. So I will be presenting as Rick Smith, the citizen, but I'm also a counselor, which I will recognize. I will preface my comments that they're my opinion, and I've heard them from my constituents and residents as well. If the county decides to take an official position besides that, that's fine. Thank you.
Just appreciate, thank you for that. Just a caution that we don't know who the next MPs are going to be. And so we need to be thinking about how does it look with 5 divisions as opposed to who may or may not be representing. So just a caution there. I've spent a lot of time actually thinking about this. I did get a phone call from our current MP asking if the county was going to have a position on it, and said I would bring it to county council and they would decide if they would have a position. I remember a couple of years ago, or maybe it was 8 or 9 years ago, I'm not sure, when the province changed and we went from, I think, 1 MLA to 3. And we were very, very concerned about what that would look like. And what ended up happening is, out of the 3 MLAs that we have, we were very, very fortunate to have one of the MLAs who probably has the smallest area, which would be Minister Wilson, become a minister and be able to have a bit more of a voice, perhaps, at the caucus table and at the table at the legislature. And so it wasn't necessarily a detriment to have 3. It turned out to be something positive, because out of 3, you have 3 voices speaking for you, and the better chance of having one that maybe sits as a minister at any of the tables. I've talked to the mayor of Beaumont as well about it, and he talked about the fact that, you know, we work a lot together on economic development with Beaumont, on cost shares. And again, I thought about that and I thought, well, but that doesn't change if our MP changes. So I am absolutely open to discussion today to understand why we need to go and present and understand what that rationale is, because I still haven't made up my mind that it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm looking to the wisdom of my colleagues to hear that. And again, the caution is not about who's in the position now, because those people could win the lottery and not run in the next election. And so we have to be talking about, are 5 MPs worse? I mean, the one thing I did think about is it might be confusing for our residents, because if you live on, you know, one side of Glen Park Road as opposed to the other side, you have a different MP. I don't know what that means for our people. So again, the floor is open, absolutely open discussion and debate. I just want to hear the wisdom of my colleagues. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I did have a conversation with our current MP regarding this, and he did point out, and looking at the map, it completely makes sense what he said, is that we could be sitting having dinner in Rollyview. I could sit there. Councillor Smith could sit there. Someone that lives around Luma could sit there. Someone that lives around Kavanaugh, and we all have different representation in such a small area. Understanding that boundary has to be somewhere the line has to be drawn, but I don't agree with how this one is laid out. I'm not sure how someone living on the corner of Highway 21 has anything to do with someone out near Atchison and Spruce Grove area. They're completely different geographic areas, and the needs are completely different. So to have the same representation or the proposed representation, it isn't clear in my mind why the map was drawn like this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith.
I'll just go back to maybe why Leduc County should do a presentation on it. And again, it doesn't matter where you're elected. If I live in Beaumont and get elected, and my frame of reference, the world I view is the airport and Nisku. If I live in Spruce Grove, my world may well be Atchison, maybe where I live each day, because that's generally where our frame of reference is. So there's 4 unique economic, I believe, drivers in the Edmonton area. Heartland being one, should be represented by an MP for grants and a voice in Parliament. The Spruce Grove, again, it's a very unique area. It's an economic driver. They have Atchison. They have a lot of things that they're working on. For us, I would hate for us to fall in and have the airport and Nisku become secondary to any of the other areas. And I'll just go back to Sherwood Park, Beaumont. For Beaumont to be bumped in and say, this time I was from Sherwood Park and I got elected, Sherwood Park would probably be, as I look out at the refineries and I look at that beautiful community, Beaumont might be secondary to it. Beaumont probably has more to do with our area than it does with Sherwood Park. Again, Leduc probably has more to do with our area than it does with Spruce Grove. So I would say there's a need to have 4 MPs pushing for economic drivers and economic grants and decisions from sewer, transit, and everything. And it doesn't matter where you think you were born. So if I was in Beaumont, I may not represent Sherwood Park as well. If I live in Sherwood Park, I may not think of Beaumont as the number one thing that I need to work on. So it doesn't matter where you're elected. I think there's 4 economic areas that need to be strongly represented, and you need to live in that area. I would fear, and Dane Lloyd, great MP, but probably 25 years old. So I assume he's going to try to run again. So let's just go under the assumption of the current MP getting reelected in Alberta. If you're a conservative in Alberta, you can retire 45 years from now and sit in that seat and never face a challenge. So I would hope the county would represent our growth, our economic area, our airport. And again, have a look where I live, guys. It may not be relevant to you. You're worried about somebody across Glen Park Road. I live out in the bush when it comes to MP representation. Does not occur. And New Sarepta is part of the Capital Region Water, Sewer, Transportation, Growth Boards. Yet I'm represented by somebody that lives in Consort. So I hope the county would at least look at our protecting our economic, prowess and importance, as well as maybe have a look at Division 1, which is, most of my residents don't live anywhere near these people you're talking about.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we should do it to protect economic development areas and growth areas. Any other comments? Councillor Balazer?
Yeah, I too am looking at the one in particular that has been talked about, and that's that Spruce Grove one. To end up way, it's almost in Saskatchewan, for crying out loud. That guy, I'm certain has no connection to what's going on out there. To me, this map is just totally wrong. I think this needs to be spoken to.
Any other comments? And again, remember, the lines are drawn for population. And if I'm hearing that we want to speak about population's important, but economic development is important as well, then we can say that. I'm just not sure how you redraw and or if we want to provide. So first off, I'm just going to do a straw poll. How many people think we should go and, well, I'll put a motion on the floor because it's just easier that way. I'm seeing Ms. Klobosco nod her head. So put a motion on the floor that Leduc County speak to the federal electoral district redistribution boundaries on September 15th. Is that correct? Okay, so the motion on the floor is that we go and speak. Any further comments or questions? Yep.
I just make my comment on it. These lines, so many of them are, they're a couple of miles from the edge of the county. It wouldn't, it's going to make some population difference, but if it was to kind of more follow the boundaries of the county, it would just, I agree with Rick on that that one, he's way out in space as far as their division goes. It's, and it wouldn't make that big a
population
difference to zip around and catch the end of the county. The piece of Beaumont, it could go across the end of the county. It could loop around and bring that in, even if we had the rest of the 3. But those are a couple of awkward little areas that have, they're important to the county. So, I would agree that could be spoken to, and hopefully at least get that east end wrapped into the rest of the county here.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the motion? Councillor Lewis.
Understanding that we too have just completed and successfully were able to redo our boundaries. understanding and taking into consideration population and coverage for ourselves and our voters. Absolutely, this is something that we need to speak to for common sense. Hopefully they can look at it again, population and coverage to make the best decision.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. We will speak. I am hearing the rationale being economic development areas. I am hearing try to follow the county boundaries because population isn't going to make much of a difference. We're looking at 4,000, it'll be 4,012, not 4,060. So it shouldn't make a difference. What other reasons? Because we can't just say, no, we don't like it. We need to come back with those two. Councillor Wanchuk.
I'm just looking at this.
Yep.
And I think that river should be dividing line.
Okay, natural boundaries. Okay, and they've always used natural boundaries or tried to. It's another one. Okay, and again, it makes sense for we're actually speaking on behalf of our residents, and things like the county boundaries and natural boundaries like the river makes sense. I'm actually not sure why we've included part of Edmonton in two of these. Maybe we could make one bigger one and not add those in, because I would think that if you were an MP and you have part of Edmonton in your portfolio, you would probably spend a lot of time in that dealing with those types of issues, which aren't necessarily rural issues. Any other things to add in, Councillor Smith?
Again, I don't need to speak, and if the county is prepared through our communications to just talk about the, lack of representation in the East End, if they could, as you say, just change a line to include the Leduc County would make a difference. And again, I think it's just important to stress that there's 4 super economic development areas around Edmonton that need strong representation and not represented in 2. If the county can do that, I don't need to be there, because as a resident and as a citizen, but as a councillor, those were the ones that really hit me as good representation for the economic drivers of Alberta, in my opinion, and some representation on the east end of the county would be awfully nice.
I'm wondering if it would be worth, and this is a question to administration, to overlap our boundaries, provincial boundaries, and these current boundaries to try and demonstrate that it does create confusion for residents.
Yes, I think that'd be an important piece to pull together just to demonstrate that point.
Great. Okay. All right. So we'll put some notes together for the 15th then.
Yes, we will.
Thank you. Look forward to that. Any other comments or questions on that? We have a motion that we're going to move forward with it. Correct? So we are done with this item? We are. Okay. 6A, letter. I think we're into information items here, are we? Yep. Any questions on any of the information items that we received? STIP funding, growth boards, and victim services redesign. Seeing no questions, move for information. Move for information, please. Councillor Blaser, all in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, Ms. Klamosko, in her infinite wisdom, has invited Lori and Jordan, who are supposed to be here after lunch. If it is council's wish, we can move their item from 1:30, which is our only afternoon item, to right now, which is 11:24. And because we have the ability to manage our agenda as it comes forward, just going to look for a nod of heads. How many people? Yep.
Sorry, can I have a 5-minute recess? Have a phone call?
11:30? Yep. Okay, 11:30. We'll take a recess for 5 minutes, resume at 11:30. Thank you very much. We are moved back out of in camera by Councillor Smith. We made no other motions in camera. We will not be reconvening at 1:30 today. For those of you joining us, we have completed our agenda this morning, and I will be adjourning at 11:46. So thank you very much.